Hello guys, welcome to my Python learning series. In which series I teach basic Python for beginners and first-time coders. So in this video I'll be talking about lists and the structure of them and how to populate them and important functions that come with lists. So let's just start. So what are lists? Basically lists are a group of elements. So if I open Windows whiteboard over here and use the pen, so we have an element which is, let's say, a box or a circle. It could be a string, it could be a number, an integer, or it could be a float. It could be any data type. So we have this element, and great, we can perform functions on this element. But we want to have multiple elements. So for example, let's say let's go to that class example. So if you are a teacher that has 20 students, for example, so this would be one student, but you want all the students have the same properties as if we say that the student is an object, which they're not, but just for simplification. So let's say every student is an object and you want multiple objects, so this would be one object. And if you have 20 students, this is only one of them, you would have another student linked to this student, so you'd have two students, and my artistic skills are really showing over here. Anyway, so for the 20 students you would have 20 connections. So as I said, a list is a group of elements, and the way that we refer to what element in the list is by something called index. So you would have a list, let's call this student, and let's say that we have only 4 students, the other 16 are off because they're sick. Anyway, so we have student number 0, student number 1, student number 2, and student number 3. So it is hard to get around at the beginning, but then it's quite easy. So this would be the 0th element, and this would be the first element, the second element, and the third element. So those are 4 elements. Although it starts from 0 to 3, if I want to check the length of this list, it would return 4, because in total I have 4 students, but I count from 0. So 0 is still an object that is similar in all the properties to the other objects in the list, or elements I should say. It is similar in every way. It just starts from 0. So if you understand that bit, then you basically aced lists. So the syntax of list is very easy. So if we just build up on this example, so we have students, and this is a list. Can I just zoom out a bit? So you'd have an equal sign, that's you defining the list, and there are 2 ways to define the list. So you can define and populate the list at the same time, or you can define the list and then populate it. And there are two main uses of those 2 different ways. So I said here you have student list. So let's just simplify this even more and say names. So this list will store all the names of those 4 students. So if you want to define the list, you'd have a square bracket, and that's you defining the list, and then you want 4 elements, so multiply by 4, and that's you pretty much have the list. So you want to, because this is names, it would make sense that names are strings, which are just combination of letters. You can put str over here. What this does is that okay, so we have names equals this. What this does is it creates a name of type string, and then you have the multiplication by 4. So it does 1 more, and then 1 more, and then 1 more. so that the total length or the total number of those elements is 4. Obviously you change this number according to your own use. So let's try to print this out, names, and see what happens if I go to the cmd python tutorial.py. So as you see here, it gave us 4 empty strings, and the reason that it gave us empty strings, and I know it's a string because there's a apostrophe over here, or apostrophes, because apostrophe contains a string and there are 4 of them. So as I said over here, it gives you 4. It gave us 4 and they were all strings, but they're empty because we have never said what they should be. So using our knowledge from the previous video, which was about loops, we can populate this. So if we just make a for loop for I, and here's where the I comes in. So we built this list, which is our foundation. It's not, there's no data here, and now we need to populate it. And I said in the previous video that I is not fully important unless you have lists. And when you use lists with loops, it kind of gets a bit different. So you can say for I in names, and this would run every element in that list. So I would be the first name, and then in the second iteration it would be the second name, etc. until names end. So in this case it would run 4 times. If this was 100, it would run, that's 10. If it was 100, it would run 100 times, and then it would stop. However, every time the value of I would be the value at that index. You would understand it a bit more when I go into it a bit more. So we don't want that, because that wouldn't help us in our case. It is very helpful, don't get me wrong, but in our current case it doesn't help us. So let's just run a regular group like you were taught in the previous video, and run it for 4, and because 4 is greater than 0, this would be the highest point in our loop. So I said for I in range 4, and this makes a loop of 4 iterations. Get the input, get the input of the user, and that would be our name that we're gonna populate into the list. But the way that we populate that is we have names, because names is the list, and we need to define what specific index we are storing that value at. So this is index 0, this is index 1, 2, 3, etc. So we need to specify what index we're working at. So we put the square brackets again, and so you don't have to put like names square bracket 0 close square bracket. You can just put I, because again I changes. I goes up by 1 every time the loop iterates, which means that it's much easier. That's why I exists anyway. And if we run this in the cmd or the command prompt, it asks us for a name. Obviously I didn't print anything, I just wanted to be fast, so we put my first name, and then we put Joan, which is an arbitrary name, and we put Jack is a cool name, and let's put Sam, and now we populated the list. Now because the program closed, those things aren't saved, which is a bit sad. So we need to find a better way of populating the list. It's in a better way to not populate it every time. So to do that, you would still have your square brackets, names equals square bracket, but now you would have the strings. If you realize, this is how, when we printed the list, this is how it looked like. So when we printed the list, it printed this, which means we can just add the names into here. Jack, John, and Sam. And let's just comment this out to show you better, and print names again. Yeah, so what we did here, we defined the list of a length of 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, and we populated it with the 4 elements. At the same time of defining it, we gave it the names. We put apostrophes to indicate that this is a string. And if we want to have a score, for example, which has a different data type, I'd presume, like integers, for example. So 21, 40, 30, 20, sorry, and 10. You would see it still has the same structure. You would have an element, a comma, an element, a comma, an element, and the last element doesn't have a comma, it has a closed square bracket. And this element would assign to this person, this element would assign to this person, etc. But we don't have the apostrophes because this is an integer. This is not a string. We don't need an apostrophe over here. And we have floats. Floats run the same thing as integers. We don't need to have apostrophes. So let's get a better grasp of I in the loop. Let me just comment this out. So I said here that I refers to the number of element at that iteration. So we have names I. This wouldn't make sense anymore. It would if we ran this and it asks us for the input and we put a different input than this would change. But this doesn't really help us because the list is already populated. So let's just print this name or any name of that iteration. So names I, again I is the number of iteration, it changes every time, and we want to say that they scored this mark. Let's say has a score of, and then comma, and then we put score I. So it pretty much is treated just like a normal variable. And if you don't know how this comes, watch the first video. So run this, and it gave us the name, has a score of, it gave us a score. Okay, so we covered lists, and this is pretty useful, I would say. Like every program that I have written pretty much ever contained a list of some sort. This is very useful, yeah, but you haven't used lists to their full potential. So lists have something called methods or functions to the list that you can apply. So a function is basically some sort of steps that you can perform in a specific object / element to change that element / object in some sort of or way. So we have, I removed my very gorgeous list. Anyway, so we have a list of 4. I'm not sure why I'm using 4, but 4 seems to be pretty easy. It's small enough. So they are connected. Lists are connected. They're connected one after each other. So 0, 1, 2, 3. You can't have 0, 3, 1, 2 unless you're talking about the element itself. Anyway, so what methods do is that they perform some sort of action on those 4 elements to change them in some sort of way. So you can, if they weren't sorted, if you had marks or scores and they weren't sorted, you can sort them. You can remove a specific element. So if this person dropped out of school and you want to remove them from your list, you can do that. If another student came in and you want to add them to the list, you can do that. And yeah, so there are a lot of functions to lists, and I put a link down in the description below of a website that explains them very well, explains every function and how it works. It gives an example on it. So anyway, I'll just go over the very basic functions. So let's say a new student came in to the class, and you want to add them. So again, if you want to perform a function on a list, you have the list name and dot, and then you can do it. Kite shows me here how all the functions that I can put. So I won't be going over all of those. The name pretty much says what they do. Append, I'm not sure if that's an English word or a programming word. A lot of English people don't know what it means. So append basically appends an object to the end of a list, or adds an object to the end of the list. So let's try this, the first one, since it's the easiest and the most used. So append, again, append is a function, so you have to end it with a parenthesis. So as the new student came in and he was called, or she was called, yeah, let's just call her student. I couldn't make up a name. So anyway, we called her student. That's fine. It's a perfectly fine name. If your name is student, good on you. And let's print names and see what happens here. So again, what are we expecting to see? We're expecting to see all of those, and at the end of them there's another element called student. That's what we are expecting, at least, unless I have screwed up massively. Yeah, it works just fine. It's not that hard. You just have append at the end of the name. Don't forget the dot, don't forget the parentheses, and boom. And we have student. So if you notice, it added student to the end of the list. If we want to specify what index we want it to be, so we want student to be right after Jack and before John. So this would be the second element, 0, 1, and you want her to be here, which is 2, and this would be 3, and this would be 4. So we don't use append, we use insert. Again, insert is also a function. So we have the parentheses, we have the dot, and insert takes 2 arguments. The first argument is where you want to insert it, and the second argument is what you want to insert. So, and don't keep it PG. So we want the index. The index is always an integer because it goes in integer values. It never goes to a negative number, and it just keeps going from 0 to positive infinity. So we have 0, 1, 2. So we put 2, and this is the index that we want, and the value is student. So if we run this, we should see student over here. Over here, sorry. Yeah. So Ahmed, Jack, student, John, Sam, and the other one that I was gonna talk about is remove. So remove removes a current element in the list, but the argument that it takes a specific element in that list. So for example, if I was running this command on this list, I would have to say remove 21 or remove 40. I would put the number 40, and over here I'm running it on the names, so I would have to have the apostrophe, and I would say remove Jack. Remove takes a specific element, it doesn't take an index, and this is either very useful or very annoying depending on what you want, and it did what it was expected to do. It removed Jack. Again, those changes aren't saved to the memory, so if we run the program, Jack will still be there. So we don't want to remove Jack, we want to remove an index, a specific index, and then we use pop. Pop takes an index instead of an element, so we can say names.pop the second index, which would remove John. and that happened. So again, the difference between pop and remove is that remove takes a specific element, pop takes a specific index. They both do the same thing, they both remove an element of a list. The difference between insert and append adds to the end of the list. Insert it at a specific index that you specify. And yeah, those are lists, they're not that scary. And we have a lot of commands over here, so I put them down in the description. So if you want to get more in depth, just check them out, and they have a lot of basically all the commands. So just see what suits your need and read about it. They give you examples and all. So this was it all for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video informative and somewhat entertaining. Check out my Instagram because I made one. I will also link it at the description below. Check my previous video, and subscribe if you think my channel is good. See you in the next one.